The lead-up period to the MDA exercise began on the 8th of August with Navy Reserve training and testing, and the deployment of sensors and equipment. The live exercise took place on August 15th through the 19th, 2005. Much of the exercise's focus was on maritime terrorist threats to the Gulf Coast's abundant critical infrastructure, which includes critical naval shipyards, shipping lanes, ports, public terminals, oil and petrochemical operations, and military facilities. Opposing forces in terrorist attacks against this infrastructure were led by Navy EOD and Coast Guard auxiliary personnel, which included a small boat swarm attack against the Northrop Grumman Ingalls shipyard, builder and repairer of the USS Cole. The EOD unit also launched 2 successful swimmer attacks against Naval Station Pascagoula, including one against the JMFC facility. Simulating the growing cyberspace capabilities of terrorists to penetrate our infrastructure's information systems, electronic warfare specialists from NAVAIR, Point Mugu, attacked Navy C-4ISR assets in an attempt to degrade communications. On the third day of the exercise, the EOD, working in close coordination with Chevron personnel, conducted a covert nighttime operation at the Chevron Pascagoula refinery. Their mission was to enact a simulated detonation of one of the chemical storage tanks, thereby creating the mass casualty and consequence management event for the Unified Command Post tabletop and for the Atmospheric Resource Capability Seminar. These latter sessions educated participants as to the available national and regional assets for weather and dispersion modeling. They also promoted coordination and communication between law enforcement, fire, and other first responders and industry participants within the Incident Command System Management structure. Gulf Coast MDA was unique in bringing together leading companies from the area's private sector into the planning and response phases within the Unified Command, thereby forging effective civil-military partnerships to address maritime terrorist threats. Gulf Coast MDA concluded on a successful note with the boarding by the Coast Guard of a vessel covertly carrying simulated mines and terrorists into the port of Pascagoula. During the exercise, Naval Reserve units had received indications and warnings of a suspect vessel transiting the Pacific Ocean from Singapore. Using its C-4ISR system, Navy reservists were able to identify, locate, and track the suspect vessel out of thousands using the same shipping routes. The Navy shared that time-sensitive information with the Coast Guard so that they could interdict the vessel before the terrorists on board laid mines along the strategic shipping lanes of the Gulf Coast. The Gulf Coast Maritime Critical Infrastructure scenario thus provided an important training and experimental environment in which to examine how a national C-4ISR architecture could extend maritime domain awareness by being able to detect, track, and locate suspect vessels, cargo, and people overseas. Actionable intelligence was generated during the exercise as well as enhanced situational awareness for the Navy and Coast Guard. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard commended the MDA exercise, citing that it would lead to improved interaction and interoperability for their personnel operating in the region. All of the exercise participants agreed that the training opportunity afforded by Gulf Coast MDA would enable increased long-term collaboration and planning among U.S. military, Coast Guard, multi-federal, state, and local agencies as well as industry in detecting, deterring, and responding to domestic maritime terrorist threats. We are a nation and a Navy at war, whether providing sovereign deck space from which to launch strikes in Afghanistan, continuing to support ground operations in Iraq, patrolling the seas to interdict terrorists, or shaping the maritime domain through swift humanitarian action in Indonesia and on our own Gulf Coast. We are contributing to joint and combined operations in ways no one could have imagined a few short years ago.